everyone. Episode 28 of Lines on the Page. I am your host, Thomas Price, and today we are continuing on with doing anime stuff within the month of May. And we're going a little bit new school. We're doing character Luffy from One. It's a character I've only drawn one time, and that was just like a really quick free sketch for a little kid. So this is going to be kind of interesting to be able to do a more full body piece, and especially with a character who is about as expressive and exaggerated as Plastic Man to a degree. But before we get into all this, it looks like we already have someone in the chat. Jay, what's up? Good evening, sir. And we're going to do a little housekeeping real quick. Haven Comics, located 1871 Slaughter Road in Madison. And please remember to like and subscribe. If you happen to like anything that we happen to do here, like, subscribe, click the follow, the bell icon, all that fun stuff. And if you're wondering where you can find me on social media, you can find me through my handle at tpriceartworks. And you can find me, I am there. Unless you have questions about it, then, ask. Nothing wrong with asking. So, I really can't tell you much about One Piece. I have tried watching it. I did not hold any reservations to the fact of thinking that I was going to be able to watch every single episode, because as of a couple days ago, the episode count is 1,061. Which I did find out a couple of years ago that the vast majority of those episodes are filler episodes, much like the comic. So even though while it still claims the title of being the longest running anime within like the last 20 years, 30 years, the vast majority of those episodes are all filler episodes, and there are people who have been diehard fans from the very beginning who are able to basically consolidate everything down to the meat and potatoes, and broke everything down with like what episodes you need to watch, and just excluding all the fat, so you don't have to worry about all that nonsense. But yeah, so while also drawing character Luffy, I'm also going to be doing something a little bit on the interesting side. And we're going to talk about something that is starting to get talked about more within the last 3 years, at least on social media. And that is the concept of portfolio reviews with comic editors and talent scouts. And I'm going to basically drop the knowledge of the top 3 things that if you are wanting to go to a con and you know for a fact that there is a publication company and they have editors there, or if they are flat out stating that they are doing a talent search of some sort, or if you're going to be uploading a digital portfolio to any site that has a submissions column. These are the top 3 things that you need to know before you can send anything out or physically be there to show anything. Yes, One Piece apparently is extremely carefree. Some of the memes and stuff like that or just random stills and stuff. Yeah, whoever the guy is that created the series, he must be a very carefree person, because just the concepts of perspective and character design and all of that, it's all over the place. And I will admit, for an entire series about pirates, there's some really interesting designs for sure. But like I said, I watched maybe the first 30 or so episodes. I remember the last couple of episodes being Luffy, Zoro, and whoever the blonde haired guy is, Sanji. That was his name. I'm not sure if Nami and the annoying dude with the nose were all together, but they were like at this diner in the middle of the island. I think that's when they met Sanji or something. I That was the last I remember watching that show. But I got a little bit turned off by the show. Not because it's a bad show. You know, it's obviously it has its target aim for viewership. Uh, but what kind of turned me off about it was the fact of it was really meant for like middle school kids or like elementary going middle school kids, and I think that's just it's the same thing with Naruto because you're dealing with a character who's like super young and you're going through this person's life, and so it makes sense for you being at the same age as the character and then watching all the way through growing up with said character. It makes sense. Usopp, that's his name. I want to call him I want to call him Pinocchio, but yeah. Oh, but yes. So the number one thing regarding if you are doing anything regarding comics and you want to do or send stuff in within a portfolio review or a submission, the number one thing that you need to know: editors want sequential artists. They do not want cover artists. If you want to get your foot into the industry, you need to do sequentials. And it's probably stepping on so many toes for all those people out there that are watching this video. But you talk to any editor, and they're going to flat out tell you cover artists as of right now are a dime a dozen. If they want an Alex Ross cover, they're going to hire Alex Ross to do a cover. They want a Peach Momoko type cover, they're going to hire Peach Momoko to do her style on those covers. It makes sense. Why? Because these people, well, at least in the States, Peach Momoko hasn't been in the industry that long. But in the sense of like, Alex Ross or Adam Hughes or uh, Scotty Young, all those guys have been in the industry for well over a decade. And it makes sense because their covers sell. There was a time where, and it's been a long time, uh, but for the longest, there was only one cover to every comic issue. And it wasn't until Man of Steel #1, which came out in 86 or 87, and that featured the first variant cover ever. So it wasn't until the late 80s when you start getting the concept of variant covers happening, and there was only two. And then there were a couple of other issues that happened within that portion of the late 80s. And then it wasn't until the 90s that you started getting the flooded, oversaturated market of variant covers. And of course, most of those did come from Marvel Comics simply because of the same gang of guys who ended up becoming the OG Image group. Uh, but the thing is that the majority of those comics, they were all #1s, and Marvel, I think it was Ghost Rider 15, that they decided, you know what, we're going to instead of having #1s being like a flood of variants, let's pick a random issue that you know we can say that you can have a variant even if it isn't a #1. It was like the 15th issue of Ghost Rider for that run, and that was one of those weird things that just kind of happened, and then the market became flooded, and especially within the 21st century, because for every at least within the big two, for every series that are coming out, if not weekly, then definitely bi-weekly, there's going to be two variant covers. Now, that isn't the case for every single company. There's a lot of companies that don't do a flood of variant covers. but they're very few and far in between. But yeah, the vast majority of the time, you're going to have just a flood of that stuff. And like I said, they don't want cover artists unless they're specifically stating that they want cover artists. They're not looking for it. They want sequentials because the purpose of comics is to tell a story visually. Now, you can argue and say that you can tell a story through a cover, and it is very, very possible. But those types of covers, they're becoming rarer and rarer. Um, because a lot of these variant covers, I mean, they're really not saying or telling really anything about what the comic is about. And it's even worse when the covers are extremely good, but the interiors are terrible. Um, but that is definitely something that you just really need to look out for. As far as just whenever you're trying to uh, put these things out there into the world for another person to be doing a portfolio review out of it. Um, so within that first point, you need to ask yourself the question: can you visually tell a story and it make sense? Uh, can your eyes read from left and right through the panels, almost in like a Z pattern? Um, is it going to visually make sense? Can a person understand that, everything that's going on? And there is a process into how to put together a page. First things first, you always are going to have an establishing shot. So, for instance, if you've got, uh, we're going to use GI Joe for instance. Uh, so you've got the Joes, and they are in, let's say, Paris, and they're trying to hunt down the dreadnoughts because the dreadnoughts are uh, just doing random terrorism things because they're part of Cobra. Okay, well, your establishing shot should start off with the first panel on page one that they are in Paris. So it makes sense for you to have a specific landmark within Paris that everyone's going to know. So the De Gaulle Arch would be perfect, and most obviously either the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre. So it makes sense to have either one of those three being, that in there, and of course showing the characters, so on and so forth. Um, the rest of that story, well, that's up to you. And of course, if you're doing stuff within a specific company, it would also make sense for your portfolio to also match characters from their franchises. And I know that there are people out there who are going to be, they, you know, um, a little bit of an issue. They don't want to draw, 5 pages worth of, Spider-Man uh, or Teen Titans or whoever. And the thing is that if you're doing a portfolio review for someone from Marvel or you're doing something for DC, hey Alan, welcome to the club. Um, if you're doing a portfolio review for a specific company, it would make sense for you to have your pages to reflect a character within that company puts out. So, if you're doing something for Dynamite, it would make sense for you to do something regarding either Red Sonja or Vampirella, which, of course, now we've got all these Disney comics that have been popping out from Dynamite. So you can also do Disney characters as well. Um, so that being said, the sky is almost the limit. But yeah, like I said, pages need to make sense and it needs to read visually. Now, this is where it gets into like a lot of nitpicking. And I've had this conversation before. And there were several questions that I got were, am I an inker? That no, I am a penciler. It's just a lot of times I end up inking my own work. So if I'm able to get hired for something, then, if they have someone already set aside as an inker, I like to make sure that my pencils are showed to where it can read visually for an inker when they put their inks on top of it, so they know exactly what to do. And this was something that I had to work on for several years to make it work and make sense. Because for the longest, I was always super frustrated as to why, whenever I do pencils, everything looks good. But then when it gets to the inking, it just comes out terrible, and I hate myself. Excuse me. So it wasn't until I finally got my hands on a uh, guide to comic book inking several years ago, and this was around the same time period that I needed to change up the my art style because I was getting really tired of drawing things that came off as very anime-esque, specifically a more uh, okay, so like guys like Ryuichi Ikegami and Katara Miura and Shiro Masamune, um, they're all fantastic artists, and I just did not want to end up being looked at as like Adam Warren. Um, because I know that the big two have worked with Adam Warren and they probably were just sick and tired of probably working with them. I really don't know. Um, but hold on. Oops. Well, I'm not sure exactly what ended up happening. All right. I have no idea what's been going on. So, um, not exactly sure what ended up happening. Adam Warren not really being used in the industry that much anymore. And, could be any number of things, but I just did not want to get looked at as, well, it's just another white guy drawing anime characters. Which, ironically enough, that was also another reason why Mark Brooks had to change his art style to what he does now. And I think he was just realizing that it's really hard within the big two to have someone with a anime manga style to put out books that are 20 pages long or whatever, because with a lot of manga there's a lot of room to breathe, there's a lot going on, and it's really not big two material. And I know the big two have tried to do that uh, with comics, because they did Live Wire, they did uh, Arachna, whatever that spider character was, several other different characters. And this was all during the early 2000s, and sales for that just weren't all that great. So now that we have understood the point, now we get to the second point of what uh, it is, Arana. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that, Jay. Um, Now we're going to get to the second point as to what uh, comic editors are looking for in a portfolio review, and that is substance over style. Um, and this is something I've talked about ad nauseum uh, on prior episodes in on this show, and that is influences are fine. We all have to learn, but the question you have to ask yourself is: are you an imitator or are you an innovator? I want to say that she did have a spider backpack thing. I just remember her being a teenager with giant goggles. I want to say she had on like a white shirt with a red spider, and I think she was wearing like super baggy pants, which was pretty typical of a lot of cartoon characters during the early 2000s. But don't quote me on that. I hardly remember much of anything about that whole story and most of those characters from that time period. Now, there are comic artists in the big two who do obviously have a very manga style. Like I mentioned, Peach Momoko, which she is Japanese. She does come from Japan. She has done, manga stuff before, and even has done stuff through heavy metal, actually, before she was asked to do all these variant covers for Marvel. And this is right before 2020, actually, if I remember correctly. Um, so if you can find those issues of heavy metal, I would definitely say give them a read. But I mean, you've also got guys like I think his name is Tech Miyazaki. I think that's I want to say that's his name. He's done several different Marvel books, ranging from All New Avengers, Champions. Want to say he's done Silk uh, for several issues. But a lot of the interior artists that are getting picked up now, they're all coming from Spain or South America, which is really interesting. And it's been even more interesting to see how things are kind of working in full circle just a bit, because a lot of those guys from Spain and South America are all technically influenced by anime. So it is kind of interesting to see how some of that is like bleeding into like two. Perfect example would be Jorge Jimenez. Um, and Carlos Gomez, another perfect example. And then, of course, if we go back a bit to the late 90s, Humberto Ramos, probably the most famous one out of all those groups. So, uh, not sure if you're guessing what I'm trying to do. I'm basically getting around to drawing Luffy, basically running for dear life. But I'm just trying to make sure that I at least get the visual down first in my head while I talk to you guys about this. But going back to what I was originally stating, um, you know, question you really do have to ask yourself is, are you an imitator or are you an innovator? And that is a hard question for any person to ask, regardless of where you sit within the industry. Uh, and, this is something that even I ask myself several times whenever I'm trying to do stuff. Uh, it's never easy, as much as I would love for it to be easy, but um, it's definitely something that keeps me grounded. And I know that there is a thing that's been popping up within uh, talks within a lot of creative circles, which is imposter syndrome. And I'm really not even sure why it's really been given name and title and all this sort of stuff, because in reality, it's just a version of depression. Down. It really is a form of depression. Your mind basically working against you. Um, Figure out is straw hats are always running away from something. Yeah, which like half the time I don't even know why he does. And of course, this is just from someone who's only watched like maybe the first 30 something episodes. Have like a string or something to keep the straw hat on. It's kind of like random impracticalities, but this should be practical. Um, I don't know. Comics, right? Uh, but yeah, so going back to the fact that substance will always beat over style. And this is going to step on even more people's toes. Um, Whatever decade or era that you romanticize, well, those days are long gone. So if you're over here, but you know, Mark Silvestri or Jim Lee or whoever, well, guess what? The 90s were 30 years ago, specifically 33 years ago. Um, those days are long gone. And but it was about the style. It wasn't really so much about the substance. And now the status quo has shifted, and people are wanting substance. People want filler. It can't be all killer all the time. Now, I'm not saying that you can't put out a comic where that just happens to be the case. In which case, you know, um, but at the same time, you're also looking at the fact of it's very much possible to make a comic book fun and still have substance. You know, Case in point, this recent run of World's Finest. Um, so now that we've established that, for starters, editors are wanting sequentials, they don't want covers, and they're looking for substance over style. Now, that's not stating that you can't have a style of your own. That's not what I mean whatsoever. It's really so much the fact of they want filler, they don't want all killer all the time. Gets into last but not least, and I'm going to call it horses, bikes, and conversations. You're probably wondering, what the hell am I talking about? And I'm glad you asked. So, editors and portfolios reviews are going to be looking for one of these three, of all three: horses, bikes, and conversations. Can you have people just having a normal conversation with each other visually? You have to let facial expressions and body language decide how it's going to go down. A perfect book if you want to know how to draw expressions. I highly, highly, highly recommend picking up a copy of Making Comics by Scott McCloud. And I always recommend this book whenever I've had kids or parents ask me, we're looking for a good drawing book for a kid because they're wanting to get into doing comics. I always recommend that over drawing comics the Marvel way. Drawing comics the Marvel way may have been the right way at one point in time, but it's not how they do comics now because the status quo has changed. Plus, that book needs to be severely updated. Unless you want to draw like John Mishima, that's really your only. That's the only thing you're really going to get out of it. But in the book, there is an entire section in terms of drawing expressions, and McCloud kind of explains the whole thing with facial expressions, almost kind of like color theory and the color spectrum. So if we can distill down three primary expressions, so happiness, sadness, and anger, then your secondaries, the expressions between the two, and then tertiary, and then what branches off of that, because there are so many different ways to express happiness, so many different ways to express sadness and anger, and then all the little ones in between, and how they all just kind of interconnect with each other. And what's great is that it's literally 2 pages worth of faces and showing perfect examples of each of these expressions. There's a lot of things in that book as well, but I cannot recommend that book any more than I already have. And it's definitely a must-have. And it reads like a comic book in and of itself. Now, like I said, horses, bikes, and conversations. Can you do one, the other, or a combination of all three? It's very possible. Um, I've joked about it on here several times. But the truth of the matter is John Mishima can draw a horse. If you don't believe me, then you need to read Conan the Barbarian. Um, More so the Savage Tales of Conan the Barbarian. But yeah, man, Shima can draw a horse. But you do have to realize if you're going to be choosing this as something that you want to do, then you have to realize that not every page in comics, especially superhero comics, not every single page are fight scenes. You know, people are going to have to talk to each other, or maybe characters just have to sit in silence. It happens. But it also really depends on what the script is really calling for. Sorry, I had to go back and forth between like two different with Luffy. So I'm trying to get this down real quick. All right, there we go. So, uh, can you have, multiple people having a conversation while they're riding horses? Or can you have one person on a bicycle having a conversation with another person that might be walking alongside them? Or maybe they're on those, two-seater bikes, there's so many different possibilities. Um, So there you have it. You now know the top three things that comic editors and talent scouts are going to be looking for whenever you do a submission or a portfolio review for any company. You're probably wondering, how do I know this? Well, when you talk to several of them in person and you pick their brain, you learn things. Excuse me. All right. Interesting. So there's no actual color. Okay, let's see. We got a question. As far as conversations go in comics, would you use real world experiences? It really depends, because, like I said, it boils down to um, the scripts. So this can be either the script that is handed to you or the script that you yourself write whenever you're doing these sample pages. Um, Good example would be Clayton Henry. Whenever he's doing these videos for whatever comic that he's doing, he will take several different references in terms of like people having a conversation, stuff like that, and then we'll stretch and uh, move stuff around to fit the perspective grid of the particular panel that he's wanting to do. Some of it he's able to figure it out, from memory. Um, but there's a couple of times where it's just like, man, I just happened to have found this really cool pick and want to try and utilize this tool to see if I can get this to work in Procreate. Um, but I think he more so does it with buildings than actual people nowadays. But the thing is that like within sample pages, the conversation could be anything. It really can. And it's really up to the, because you got to keep in mind there are no word bubbles whatsoever. Because chances are, if you're wanting to do interiors, they're going to want to look at your pencils. If you do happen to fully ink all of them, you can do that, but um, or have two sets of pages, one that's just pencils and one is pencils and inks. But it's really up to you what you want any part of that conversation to be. All right, so let's check and make sure. Aha, it's not a belt, it's a sash. All right. Now here's the other thing to keep in mind. You know, everyone has obviously a completely different set of influences, and which leads into how they draw stuff. I would love to see more people who have a drawing style that's akin to Watterson, the guy who does Calvin and Hobbes. In comics, or the more Mike Mignola take on stuff in comics, then have to see another person that, you know, copies a 90s image style. And, you know, I'm not trying to continue on, like kicking these guys because he did put out a lot of good stuff. Don't get me wrong about that. It's just when you're looking at just an overall scope of like superhero comics, uh, it's interesting because it's just like with certain artists, I definitely feel like they were a better fit for a different type of comic than others. Because, like, for instance, as much as I love Humberto Ramos and what he did with Spider-Man, he was a brave pick for Strange Academy, but it did well and it makes sense. The only other person that I think that could have done anything close would have been David LaFuente uh, or Scotty Young, for that matter. But you wouldn't have, uh, Brian Hitch on Strange Academy. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Uh, and as much as I love what Brian Hitch did for the, Stormwatch, the Authority, the Ultimates, I know that he did a run of Fantastic Four. I just haven't got around to reading it, or if I did read it, I just barely remember much of anything about it. But I know that he recently has done a run of Venom, and I really do not feel like he was the best pick to do that comic. It's just the style that you would expect for a Venom comic. It just did not mix very well. Whereas, uh, and I'm going to butcher this guy's name again, but a even Cello, Ivan Cocello, however you pronounce his name. he was a perfect fit for the comic. He basically just understood the assignment. All right, so I'm basically trying to throw in uh, a much more confident line uh, for the final pencils, because part of me is just trying to interpret this character, especially with it being the first time I've ever drawn full body Luffy, but the second time just drawing this character in general. And I'm trying to, I guess, just get a better grasp and creating a bit of momentum while also trying to exaggerate some stuff just a little bit here and there. If we really wanted to exaggerate the character, because he loves food so much, it would make sense to make sure why I'm drawing that part is slashed that way. Could have just drawn looking like a 500-pound fat Buddha. And of course, I know that the character has bulked up over the years, but in my mind, he is always this very lanky plastic man type character. All right, so now we're getting into drawing feet. Sandals. Go. Oh wow. I almost pulled the Liefeld. Ha! All right. So glad I caught myself before I continued on with that. Oh man. Not saying that I could not have flipped that around, but oh man. Okay. Big toe. Let's see here. Now his sandals have a specific. Okay, so it's like a triangle. Okay, so something that I try to keep my mind in check a bit is whenever drawing characters that are wearing sandals, is that if you've ever ran in sandals or flip flops, and I'm talking like your typical, like it's not strapped down to your ankle and all that sort of stuff, there's going to be a lot of this motion going on whenever you are even just simply walking, but definitely if you're trying to run and trying not to lose your sandals while running, uh, there's definitely going to be a specific amount of distance between the ball of your foot and the inside sole of your sandal or flip flop. So that is what I'm doing here with that. And I think I will do about the same. All right. So we're going to clean up some of this, and then we're just going to go straight to town with the colors. And before I forget, he has a scar right here, and then he's got an X-shaped scar right here. Did not want to forget that. make sure that he doesn't have any sort of extra. Okay, so it doesn't look like he has any extra jewelry. Okay, so yep, he does. Okay, good. So it's on the opposite side. All right, let's call. We yes, typical style points for anime. Give him a scar. And before I forget any more, there is a knot right here. So, like any good protagonist, there is an equal amount of blues and reds. So we're going to be giving him that. And yellows. So can't forget about that either. All right. And as per usual, we're going to be doing skin tones real quick. First, before we start going into the clothing, the rest of the accoutrement. I think I erased this real well. All right. And doing things a little bit different, but not so much compared to what I've done with some of the previous stuff. I guess my mindset is that because he's been sailing, he's going to have a little bit more of a flat tone base. We're just going to build up some values. Now, the interesting part is going to be in when we start dealing with the straw hat and the sandals. And because I don't have a singular color yet, that's going to give me that uh, wicker burlap kind of look. We're going to be blending in a couple different colors to create that color. We're going to be using a different type of skin tone for scar on his chest. And as the creator of the series basically just gave him what basically kind of looks like a lot of scar tissue on a surgical scar, basically. And we're going to go ahead and throw that down. Now, while it is a bit of a darker color than I would have cared for it to be, every surgical scar when it heals, it's different. Um, and I'm just working off the experience from my epidectomy that I had when I was 25. Uh, some of those scars are completely gone. One of them is not. So it's definitely got a little bit of a purple pinkish kind of look. right. Thank you, Jay. That's basically the whole idea of what I want to do. Have a relaxing video. All right, so we're going to move into the reds, and we're going to be using. Let me think before I do this. Yeah. All right. So we're going to be using a bit more of a stronger red. Then we'll be using a much darker, much darker tone for some of the shading. Now, this part actually just now kind of popped in my head. As far as just people who are wanting to do covers and wanting to get into the industry, it would be best for you all to basically um, try to get in contact with people who are specifically only doing covers, and especially those who have a steady line of work and stuff coming out. So, that'd be anyone from, say, like Mark Spears, Nathan Searcy, Source Young. Um, the list can go on, but uh, try and get in contact with those people, pick their brain, and try and learn from them. Which I'm pretty sure that the the concepts for covers now, it can go any and every way. But I will say that some of what I said today does kind of leach over and apply. I mean, obviously things are going to be different. Um, and if your goal in life is to be, the next whoever, well, it's not going to go very well, I don't think. But if your goal is to be better and excel as a certain prolific cover artist, that's I would say it's a good dream and it's definitely attainable. There's just going to be a lot of hard work to get to that point. Um, if I was doing the cover gigs, um, part of me is like, um, I would love to do something that could be better than what Mark Brooks puts out. I love his stuff. I really do. He puts out some amazing covers, especially when he does all those collages. Or actually, not really so much collage, but it's more so a group collective type covers. Perfect example would be uh, the uh, House of X Powers of X cover that he did. Absolutely beautiful. And I would love to do covers like that if that was my given opportunity. It's obviously not. It's not what I'm going for because I would rather visually tell stories and even write some of my own stories than have to do covers. Now, if the right gig comes along and they're like, "Hey, we would love for you to do a cover for this," sure, no problem. But that's not going to be my vocation. All right. So those are done, and then we're going to go to actually let's do the yellows real quick just to get those out of the way. Right. I'm going to use this as a good example. In the case of a comic like Ultra Mega, even though um, James Heron is the one who does the interiors and all the A covers, he's obviously had several people do variants. And of course, what better person than, a friend and a colleague of a similar style than Dane Warren Johnson to be doing cover comic, and it makes sense. It fits. Um, but at the same time, I am kind of missing I guess more so the real purpose of a comic book cover, and that is, you know, does it relate to, whatever the character is, and does it have something that not only does it pertain to the story, but does it also draw you in to want to pick it up off of the shelf? Um, that's definitely something that I miss severely. Um, fun covers are fine. They definitely have their purpose. Um, while I haven't been reading any of the recent issues of the Flash, but there was a cover that came out several issues back, and you've got the Flash with his head down, holding Apollo clothes, walking through a prison in near darkness, and it begs a lot of questions as far as just like, you know, is it him? Is he going to prison? That's why he's got the garb with him, or is it for someone that he knows and he's disappointed to the fact that someone who was close to him and he's having to hand these over? Like I don't know. It begs a lot of questions, and it is it's a very simple cover, but it's also visually enticing and it grabs my attention and it makes me want to pick it off the shelf. Right, this way. And if I remember correctly, there's much lighter blue on the cuffs part of this. I want to go over this again with the lighter blue just to blend it in. Bill, what's up? Hope you're doing well. All right, so with straw and burgundy and that kind of color and texture, would be using what's known as a light suntan. Because what's going to end up happening is that once we blend this in with a warm gray uh, marker, either one or three, will give off a very tan burlap kind of color. Right. So I think what we're going to do is start off with W1. See how that works. Not much. So we're going to up it just a bit. And hold on. Are you talking about the one where Owen Wilson is playing a parody of because if you're talking about that one, I might wait until it hits streaming. Uh Unless there's like an actual like Bob Ross documentary uh or autobiography or however you want to call it. Uh then I might actually go and see that in the theater. But which speaking of theaters, pretty sure I mentioned this in the last drawing stream. Went to go see Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3, and it was fantastic. Yeah. So is it the Owen Wilson film or is it a completely different film? I need to know for science. Let's see here. Going to get my bag of markers, other than the one that I've been searching through. Another type of yellow. Let's I'm choosing more of a pale yellow for this. I don't want a overpowering yellow. Okay, so it's the Owen Wilson one. Yeah. Yeah. Probably going to wait for streaming for that one. It looks like it might actually be a funny film. I just have a hard time justifying shelling out money to go see that in the theater. And because like the last movie that I went to go see in the theater, well, the last two films I remember going to the theater to see that weren't superhero films that I wanted to shell money out to go see. The first one was Tenet, and the other one was 1917. Um, like it's, I think I've just gotten to a point with a lot of movies is that with well, depending on which one it is, they'll end up having it streaming the same time that it is in the theaters. Owen Wilson saying, "Wow." Um, but yeah, it's getting harder and harder to justify shelling out uh, money to go see a normal movie in the theaters now because it's most of them they either end up on streaming or they're a series on a streaming service. So that helps too. Um, but yeah, they're just becoming a little bit on the rare side. Um, and the one movie that I regret not seeing in the theater, but I did end up watching it on streaming was great. What was that DiCaprio film? The Remnant? I think that's what it's called. The one where it's like out in the cold frontier. I think that's what it was called. Um, really wanted to go see that in the theater, and I never did. All right. So now that we got the colors down, we're going to go straight into inking. I saw a reel on Instagram, and someone actually took the song "Careless Whisper," but they replaced all the lyrics with Owen Wilson saying "Wow." I forgot who it was. I can't remember if it was one that was suggested or if it was one that Alan sent to me because he and I will just try to outreel each other sometimes on Instagram. It gets really bad. Um, this around this way so I can get a better angle. Great. I just mentioned the whole uh, thing about Owen Wilson doing the whole Careless Whisper thing, and now I've got the sax melody of Careless Whisper going off in my head while I'm doing this, which does not help. Ooh. All right. So something that I've talked about for plenty of times is having line weight, which if I haven't, I do apologize for that. But that is actually a good subject that I'll probably delve into uh, another video and another time. All right. So, what I generally like to do with line weight is to have a thicker outline of the character itself. Just kind of pops it out just a bit. And then any particular line that's either going towards the viewer is generally going to be thicker than any line that's going in the opposite direction, further away from the viewer. Makes sense, right? But more so, whenever we're dealing with a single character like Luffy, uh, there's going to be much thinner lines of a smaller weight, and that means that we're able to create a little bit of a distance because you wouldn't have, well, again, this really does go down between particular artists, but majority of the time, if we're dealing with like ordinary comic stuff, it would make sense that particular lines are not going to be as prominent as others. But you would never do a pass of pencils or pencils and inks, and then you send it off to, or actually, no, we're just going to say straight pencils. You want to send an entire thing of pencils with only one type of line weight, and you send that off to an inker and say, do your thing. Because then it's literally down to the inker to have to figure out and correct all of your mistakes because you didn't put down the line. Uh, and, you know, that also is a whole other topic of discussion, inking that is, that we can definitely go into ad nauseum. Um, so if that is something that you're interested in me doing um, in future video this year, please let me know. Hey, so yeah, uh, patience. It's always something that kind of have to exercise whenever you're doing this because it's super simple to just haste your way into it. As the saying goes, haste makes waste. Why it's called the runs. All right, looks like we got a vote to do a video on line weight in the near future this year. All right, so I'm going to be doing something a little bit on the nose of something that Adam Hughes would do when it comes to just long running strands of fabric or ribbon. So, which I'm not sure if you guys had saw what I was doing with the in the pencils. Um, so with a piece of fabric that's going to be floating off in the air, it could be two pieces of fabric, uh, whatever the case may be. Um, so with this, we're going to have the knot right here. So then you would have um, a bit of a hatching coming from the knot going out. Then the turn would be right here. Then we will have the other turn right here. And then we've got another turn right here. And then we start adding in a bit of extra movement. Then we go back to the rest of the sash. There you have it. One sash. All right. Last but not least, back on. And we're going to use an even smaller to add in some extra details. So, like the scarring, and some shading. Oop. All right, and a little more. Now we could do like a high contrast shade. It's very possible. Um, for the sake of time, just not going to do that and just stick to some simple cross hatching. All right. Last but not least, throwing in the blacks. Generally, whenever I'm inking my own stuff, uh, especially with pages, because it's so easy for me to get wrapped up in everything else. And this is something that I learned from that comic book inkers book that I managed to get several years ago. Is to put an X over places where you're going to be putting in, this, what's known as spot black or uh, black fill. It's one of those things that pencilers will do for inkers so that they know exactly what part is going to be, blacked out, and it makes sense. Let's see. So the part I'm going to be doing now is just to give a little bit of extra exaggeration towards the line weights to give it a bit more depth. If you happen to be a fan of One Piece and you like this, please let me know either in a DM or, uh, yeah, just shoot me a message because this piece will be for sale if you're interested in picking it up. And we will drop the details about that later. Would be nice if I had an assistant moderator to help balance this stuff out. Right. Couple extra lines, and we will be done for the night, which actually not that bad, considering that we were able to do this and talk about a lot of stuff. look like there's a section of yellow that I didn't get. All right, guys, there you have it. One Monkey D. Luffy. Figured some little extra particles wouldn't be a bad idea. And of course, last but not least, always sign your work. There you have it, Monkey D. Luffy. And weirdly enough, we actually got it done right at the 2 hour mark, so I'm super excited about that. Thank you, everyone who just happened to have shown up and was here throughout the entirety of all this. Don't worry if you had missed anything prior. This will obviously be up to view, so all you have to do is just go back to the very beginning, and you'll hear all of the 3 different points of what to expect if you are doing a portfolio review or talking to a talent search agent when applying for the comic industry. So, that being said, I'm going to end off the night with, again, another amount of housekeeping. Haven Comics, located 1871 Slaughter Road, Suite F in Madison, Alabama. And please remember to like and subscribe because, everything is awesome when you do happen to like and subscribe. So please smash that button. I'm so happy I still have that up here. Every like, every subscribe, every follow, clicking the bell notification, sharing and commenting helps us immensely. I cannot tell you how much it does. It actually does. Because we have to figure out other ways to beat the algorithm. Stupid updates. If you want to know where you can find me on social media, you can find me through Linktree at T Price Artworks, which I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as very kind of dead Tumblr, Mastodon, and Hive, and I also happen to have a Patreon as well. So, several different places you can find me, and you can also find me also here at Haven Comics in Madison on the weekends. So, with that being said, I hope everyone here has a good night, and we will be back again on next Sunday nights, and with the last character for the Sunday nights within the anime spectrum, in which we will be doing Naruto. So that's going to be a first one for me to do. It's going to be interesting. So we'll get down to it. See you later.